In my presentation, I look at the coordinates of animal inscription in Argentina. I argue that the nature of the Argentine case demands that we look for new modes of storytelling that include the non-human as a relevant actant in the making both of historical and cultural narratives. I take the term actant from the actor network theory, and Latour in particular, that understands that everything in the social and natural world exists within networks of relationships, and that the non-human participates in the making of those networks. My work focuses on the inscription of animals in relationship to animal slaughtering, which I found to be a recurring trope of Argentine imagination. First, I will briefly analyze the rendering of animal slaughtering during the independence process from Spain, and I will then turn to the historical coordinates of 2001 economic meltdown to see how animal slaughtering was depicted in that historical setting, focusing in Albertina Carri's film La Rabia from 2008. Though desperate in time, I see these two historical moments as related for being critical episodes in the national configuration and points in time that offer distinctive modes of representation for animal slaughtering. From the inception of the nation, Argentina had an economy based on the cattle industry. The first industry to settle in Argentine land after the Revolución de Mayo in 1810 was a saladero, an establishment for the killing of livestock and the processing of salted meat introduced by the Englishmen Robert Staples and John McNeill. The initiative of Staples and McNeill was soon followed by Creole entrepreneurs, and in 1815, Juan Manuel de Rosas, in partnership with Terreno and Dorrego, founded the second establishment of this kind. In A Socioeconomic History of Argentina, Brown explains how the division of labor worked. Rosas was the one dealing with cattle management, which displayed his close relationship to the world of the estancieros and the political interests he would later represent after assuming as governor of Buenos Aires in 1829 and while holding absolute power of the Argentine Confederation from 1835 to 1852. Saladeros coexisted with another modality of abattoir that dated from the colonial period and still operated near the city of Buenos Aires. These butchering spaces were the mataderos that provided beef to the inhabitants of Buenos Aires. There were two primary mataderos in the city of Buenos Aires by the time of independence, and they were situated at the north and south of the city. The one in the south was referred to as La Convalescencia for its proximity to an hospice founded in the mid-18th century that had become known as La Convalescencia after 1793. La Convalescencia is a facility referenced in Argentine's foundational fiction El Matadero, a short story written by Esteban Echeverría in 1839 and published posthumously in 1871. Echeverría's fictional piece was a fierce political critique of the Rosas regime and the cruelty with which he and his people persecuted his political opponents. Succinctly summarized in the gruesome plot of El Matadero, the butchers of the slaughterhouse of La Convalescencia, all of them federals and aligned to Rosas' regime, torture, rape, and murder a Unitarian young man just as brutally as they slaughter the livestock of the slaughterhouse. Echeverría's description of animal slaughter in the passage displayed does not refer much from the historical accounts that I've found in my research. Both mataderos and saladeros have very precarious technologies for dealing with cattle, an Argentine feature that amused and horrified in similar modes the European travelers of the time and the historians that studied the period. So what kind of community is Echeverría imagining in the slaughterhouse, and what kind of imagery did Echeverría's literary imagination set for future representations? The slaughterhouse inaugurates Argentine literature by rendering animals with great historical and political significance. Canonical readings of El Matadero have thoroughly unpacked the political references in Echeverría's piece, but I argue that Echeverría's short story also serves as an anthropologic treatise of the relationships to cattle and meat in Argentine society. Echeverría offers what I here call, following Donna Haraway, an interspecies narrative made of humans and animals alike. El Matadero serves as an early historical document of the social practices surrounding cattle and the importance of animal slaughtering in Argentine society. And it displays grim modes of human-animal relationships that are not far from the actual practices that surrounded animal slaughtering. This makes El Matadero a rare insight into an experience designed to remain out of sight and under surveillance. The relationship between slaughterhouses and concealment has been thoroughly analyzed in historical accounts. Noel Vieles, to mention one, affirms that slaughterhouses have created, from the very beginning as distinctive spaces, a relationship between power and sight tending to sequester the vast majority of society from a labor that is considered both morally and physically repellent. But when looking into Argentine literary representations and other representations as well, one discovers that animal slaughter has always been visible, especially in moments of national crisis. And this is because turning political points and moments of national distress contribute to destabilize the biopolitical orders that inscribe at the same time human and animal bodies, and as well as their distinction. I will here turn to the events of 2001 and its Argentine crisis to see how this political destabilization of animal humans worked in another historical context and in another cultural artifact. I will try to show how Albertina Carri's film La Rabia returns to the imagery proposed by Echeverría and at the same time reflects upon the political coordinates of its time. The 2001 crisis saw a meltdown of the economic model of the 1990s that fixed the rate of the Argentine peso to the US dollar. In December 2001, the Argentine economy defaulted as a result of external debt, and in order to prevent the bankruptcy of national banks, the government froze the savings of private citizens. Within 2 weeks, there was a succession of 5 presidents and a state of emergency was declared. The images of homeless people, demonstrations, and civilian bloodshed, broadcasted by the media, were gruesome and shocking, but they were also exclusively urban. In an eerie contrast, the mainstream media ignored the dire conditions of the countryside, except for mentioning a decrease in production. As farmers waited to see how the economy would develop, the rural reality was shaken by dead cattle that started to appear on the pasture lands. Usually animal bodies would look whole from a distance, but as you move closer, you'd notice that a few parts of the animal had been carved out. The prime cuts, those that a man on his bicycle could manage to carry. These out-of-place deaths shed light on the profound impact of the national crisis. In cities, the fringes of the population who were starving started to break into supermarkets and take food with them, in what was referred to as saqueos. In the countryside, they resorted to butchering random cattle in this freelance manner. The 2001 post-crisis modality of animal slaughter eerily echoed the slaughterhouse and confirmed that the imagery surrounding animal slaughtering, both when it came to historical animals and their appearance in cultural artifacts, should be looked at critically in terms of national crisis. During the years that followed 2001, the imagery surrounding animal slaughter proliferated in the work of many artists, writers, and filmmakers. I will here only analyze the case of the film La Rabia, directed by Albertina Carri, to see how this film goes back to the foundational imagery of animal slaughter proposed by Echeverría, confirming the relevance of this foundational text in moments of national crisis, and to show how animals, and in particular animal slaughter, are a core part to the national identity of the country. In the context of Argentina's December 2001, La Rabia deliberately places animal slaughter at the center of its cinematic narrative. Its plot is structured through a series of scenes of animal slaughtering that include different species like weasels, a rabbit, and finally a big pig, which constitutes the climax of the film's narrative. What does it mean in the aftershock of the crisis that animal death is found again at the core of cultural imagination? And what were the relationship between animals and humans that these visualizations propose in order to further think about human relationships to nature? Human and animals appeared together from the start, and before the film dives into its first static long shot of the countryside, we read, "The animals in this movie lived and died according to their environment." And like the modern tendency to invisibilize animal death in the confined place of the industrialized slaughterhouse, La Rabia deliberately shows the killing of animals as a strategy to redefine the relationships between nature and culture in the aftermath of the economic collapse. If within The neoliberal decade, the industrialized slaughterhouse had functioned as a space where the politics of sight erase our trace in the killing of other species, then Carrie's intention of placing animal death at the core of her film can be read as a concrete political gesture. From the very beginning, the film offers ways to imagine significant relationships among species. In the narrative, La Rabia is one of the farms where the action takes place, but it is also a signifier that refers to a disease, rabies, which can be spread across species. Echoing Jeremy Bentham's foundational claim for animal liberation, the title La Rabia can be looked at as a suggestion that animals and humans cohabitation translates into the sharing of a common suffering. Though I have mentioned other scenes of animal slaughtering in the movie, I will focus on this one, which is the slaughtering and preparation and cooking of a pig. The activities occur in the context of a celebration among the small rural community of La Rabia. The killing itself is portrayed in a naturalistic mode that does not try to conceal the details of animal killing from the spectator. The whole scene is shown in a series of medium shots and close-ups in which a pig is transported, killed, slaughtered, and cooked in front of the camera. Like in Echeverria's scene of animal slaughtering, the violence surrounding animal killer appears here once more with no mediation. If, like Bruno Latour says, the relationship of nature and culture in modern societies is understood as a cleavage, how can we think about the proliferation of animal-human relations in this cultural archive? Through this presentation, I have tried to read the Argentine cultural archive by doing what Derrida calls to follow the animal trace. Though modern thinking has systematically tried to make this close relationship to animals invisible, the tale of Argentine's national identity manages to visualize once and again its relationship to animal slaughter. This is because Argentina's economy and therefore much of its social and historical coordinates have developed around the breeding and killing of animals. I've tried to demonstrate that encounters and the cohabitation with non-human animals has not only belonged to the historical realm, but has also proliferated in the cultural production of the nation. These linkages become more evident in moments of national crisis, such as the coordinates of the Rosas regime depicted in Echeverria's tale, and the cultural production of the decade that followed the 2001 crisis. This is because moments of national crisis disrupt the order proposed by the modern project and capitalism in turn. These orders inflict an ontological separation of animals and humans for which the industrialized slaughterhouse has become one of the most exemplary figures. By articulating the ideas from scholars both in the field of animal studies and the actor and neo-materialism, I have argued that Argentine cultural and historical narratives emerge from the significant engagement of humans and animals, and that the most exemplary environment to look at this is through the imagery of animal slaughtering. I have not exactly argued that the imagery of animal slaughtering proposes less anthropocentric understandings of the animal, since the coordinates of animal killing still shows very clear positions of power among species. Nevertheless, I have tried to move in the direction of understanding how animals and their death needs to be looked at under a prism that sees them as part of the imagined communities that, in Benedict's terms, is formative to the nation.